Welcome back everyone to GGN. This is part 3, should be the final part for today for Monday, May 3rd, 2013. I'm Darko. My website is ggnonline.com and on YouTube, ddarko2012, ddarko2013. I'm ready to cover some of the economy, just all kinds of different types of news articles. It's a 0.6% world who owns what of the 223 trillion in global wealth. They found the media keeps rediscovering year after year, to its great surprise, is that as a result of the global central bank policy, the rich got richer and the poor kept on getting poorer, even though, as we predicted, the global political powers would at least seek to enforce policies aimed at reversing this wealth redistribution from the poor to the rich. Now that the topic of wealth distribution is once again vogue, says below we present the latest such update. Looking at the bottom line, 29 million or 0.6% of those with any actual assets under their name own 87.4 trillion or 39.3% of all global assets. And here's a graph, world wealth levels of 2012. The most were, of course, Australia, North America, with the exception of Mexico, and Europe / Scandinavia. Conservative magazine Counsels Rand Paul to join the CFR. So it says here on the Nationwide, I'm probably running for president tour. Senator Paul should join the Council on Foreign Relations. It says at least that's the incredibly bad advice offered by Jacob Heilbronn, the freshman senator and scion of the libertarian-leaning Paul family. It says broaden his message by appealing to the mainstream. This sounds like the none-too-successful strategy of several former GOP presidential contenders. Colombia heads towards NATO membership. Colombia's defense ministry later this month will sign a cooperation agreement with NATO in hopes of joining the International Military Alliance. In June, NATO will sign an agreement with the Colombian government, says, with the defense ministry to start a process of rapprochement and cooperation with an eye towards also joining that organization. So that's a pretty big deal, NATO getting into South America. Venezuela's Capriles says Maduro government will fall. So the opposition leader, who just recently lost the elections, says Maduro's government will cave in under the pressure of growing economic troubles, infighting, and a belief by many Venezuelans that it stole the April election. Of course, you got people defending their enslavement, like socialism has never succeeded long-term. It's a long-term hardship and suffering because, of course, they live in America, and it's either you're capitalist or you're socialist. So they most Americans tend to be along the lines are on the side of huge corporations that exploit them for some reason. Don't ask me why, but yeah, see, despite Venezuela oil, the socialist government has been driving the nation's economy into the ground, never mind sanctions imposed on them by other nations, like the North Korea. The real reason Maduro will fall is that he's certifiable wacko nutcase, aka crazy. If psychiatrists were to test him, he'd be committed to an asylum. So I suspect the military will take over Venezuela sooner or later. Venezuela's defense chief rules out coup. Defense minister said Sunday that he would never support a military coup to unseat President Nicolas Maduro and has never even entertained the idea. China is reaping the biggest benefits of Iraq oil boom. The Chinese had nothing to do with this war, says attention Michael Makovsky. China bought hundreds of billions of dollars worth of U.S. debt, which provided the funding that made the war possible. Now China is getting the oil along with interest payments from the next few generations of Americans. Of course, as the A-team saying they love it when the plan comes together. The Makovsky that Crypticon is talking about, referring to, is this quote: "We lost out," former Defense Department officials said of the Bush regime, who worked on Iraq's oil policy. Quote, "The Chinese had nothing to do with the war, but from an economic standpoint, they are benefiting from it, and our Fifth Fleet and Air Forces are helping to assure their supply," end quote. Law expert says Saddam's trial was illegal. The trial of deposed Iraq leader Saddam Hussein contravened international law because it was carried out under laws put into place by the occupying U.S. forces, according to an expert in international criminal law. Libya to contest ICC bid to try Gaddafi's son. Officials preparing appeal to reverse the Hague-based court decision to prosecute Saif Islam for war crimes. So it's kind of interesting, too, because France was using phosphorus explosives and all kinds of, I think it was even cluster bombs over Libya. There was footage of that during the whole Libyan crisis, but they won't be held accountable for that, much like the United States with uranium-tipped bombs in Iraq. Or, those individuals firing on the helicopter on Iraqis. Basically just some real gory stuff. And of course that got out, and that's why Bradley Manning's standing tall in front of the man. Because, try to make these people accountable for what they're doing, what they're saying. U.S. manufacturing unexpectedly shrank in May at the fastest pace in 4 years. Shrank in May at the fastest pace in 4 years, showing slowdowns in business and government spending are holding back the world's largest economy. Irish City hosting the G8 summit gets fake storefronts to create appearance of prosperity. That's interesting, isn't it? It's located in a region devastated by austerity and a global wealth consolidation operation. Says this, I know I'm going to mispronounce this, but Enniskillen will be turned into a movie set style simulation of a thriving town when global leaders pass through for the G8 summit next month. They're basically empty shops that are being made to look as if they are thriving businesses. What they've done, they filled the shop front window with photographs in the windows of what the business before it went bankrupt or close. The initiative is stemming from the Foreign Office in London. New crime of eating while homeless. By outlawing dumpster diving, Houston is making life impossible for the most vulnerable. Remember, I've covered this before about in Spain, they were locking up dumpsters to avoid people from eating out of there. Whenever one of our cities gets a star turn as a host of some super sparkly event such as national political gathering of the Super Bowl, its first move is to tidy up by having the police sweep homeless people into jail, out of town, or under some rug. But Houston's tidy uppers aren't waiting for a world-class event to rationalize going after homeless down and outers. They've preemptively outlawed the crime of dumpster diving in the Texas city. Says here in March, James Kelly, a 44-year-old Navy veteran, was passing through Houston, connected with his family, destitute and hungry. He chose to check out the dining delicacies in the trash bin near City Hall. Spotted by police, Kelly was prompted chargedly with disturbing the contents of a garbage can in the central business district. Disturbing the contents of a garbage can. Can't make this crap up, guys. I was just basically looking for something to eat, he told the Houston Chronicle, but unbeknownst to both his tourists and great majority of Houston's generally generous citizens, an ordinance dating way back to 1942 says that molesting garbage containers is illegal. They're trying to criminalize what some call homeless behavior. A side dish of maggots with supermarket meat, so livestock to be fed larvae reared on cow and pig excrement, and European Union trial to meet rising demands for meat. EU plan to use protein-rich fly maggots instead of soybeans in animal feed. The waste products, including spent grain from whiskey making, could be used. Also, it says global demand for meat and dairy products is predicted to double by 2050. Then we have this. Humanity has two options: become multiplanetary or go extinct. So, it says here, tech entrepreneur and SpaceX founder Elon Musk on Wednesday discussed his desire to create a self-sustaining human civilization on the planet Mars. But there's vertical villages. There's all kinds of things that can be done as far as food and living space. Submersible structures, habitats, and seafloor living spaces. So this is a pretty interesting article I found from Cryptagon. It's pretty cool. I mean, here's some of the pictures that they have in there. I'll just kind of scroll through here for you. Taxpayer dollars used by U.S. government to promote GMOs in other countries. It says not content to allow Monsanto to poison Americans. The U.S. government is using your tax dollars to promote bioags, giants, genetically modified crops overseas as well. Reuters says tax dollars are going to pay for overseas lobbying, which promotes the use of controversial biotech crops that have been developed by Monsanto and other seed manufacturers. So a review of the diplomatic cables between the U.S. State Department and embassies in more than 100 countries found the State Department officials promoting the commercialization of specific biotech seeds, according to the report. Doing the absolute opposite of so-called green revolution techniques, poorest Indian farmers are growing record amounts of food. So it says here it's exciting. Scientists and experts test on the soil show it's particularly rich in silicon, but the reason for the super yields is entirely down to a method of growing crops called system of rice or root intensification, SRI. It has dramatically increased yields with wheat, potatoes, sugarcane, blah, blah, blah. says here it's being hailed as one of the most significant developments of the past 50 years for the world's 500 million small-scale farmers and the 2 billion people who depend on them. It's basically what it comes down to is instead of planting 3-week-old rice seedlings in clumps of 3 or 4 in waterlogged fields, as rice farmers around the world have traditionally done, the farmers carefully nurture only half as many seeds and then transplant the young plants into fields one by one and much younger. They also said they spaced them at 25-centimeter intervals in a grid pattern to keep the soil much drier and carefully weed around the plants to allow air to the roots. The promise that less is more was taught by Mr. Kumar, a young state government extension worker. Lastly, while the Green Revolution that averted Indian famine in the 70s relied on improved crop varieties, expensive pesticides, and chemical fertilizers, SRI appears to offer a long-term sustainable future for no extra cost. Then we have this, talking about robots. Drone controlled by computer will be able to track and round up sheep and cows. The eye in the sky aid for farmers monitoring livestock in remote areas. So it says here the student develops robots which will eventually be controlled by a smartphone. So never mind just getting yourself an Australian sheepdog or a border collie and having a companion at the same time. It's, you know, it's. I guess it's kind of anti-human in my opinion. You have to have somewhat of a disgust for humans, kind of like people who want to have a disgust for their own race. You know, so I guess they just want to see humanity get killed off, their own people killed off, for being, you know, all in the name of being politically correct and for efficiency, right? Drones close in on farms, the next step in precision agriculture. So I covered this a couple of years ago, almost, 2-3 years ago, about basically robots on the farm. Drones continue their steady approach into different aspects of our lives. But it goes on here and it says, the experts are beginning to point to our attention to the real future of unmanned vehicles, farming. Why? It can save money. Video shows drone nearly striking passenger plane. So it says here that shows an out-of-control drone barely missing an Afghan passenger plane as it flew over Afghanistan. U.S. expert calls for halt in military robot development. The UN experts called Thursday for a global moratorium on the testing, production, and use of armed robots that can select and kill targets without human command. It says war without reflection is mechanical slaughter. A decision to allow machines to be deployed to kill human beings worldwide, whatever weapons they use, deserves a collective pause. Remember, they can kill more effectively. So that's what an expert said. Google acquires wind power firm, Makani Power. So I'm only covering this because it's a trend that you need to keep an eye on, which is these big, huge companies. These aren't small grassroots companies, mom and pops and all that, is doing this stuff. They're at the head of it, right? The ex-Microsoft manager plans to create first U.S. marijuana brand, where you can eventually import legally from Mexico. Why don't you grow it in the United States like hemp? Starbucks-style pot stores, new company plans a chain. We are big marijuana, this says. So who would ever want to be called, we're big marijuana? Like big tobacco. This is the same thing, the former Microsoft manager. Supermarket keeping track of what, that's one thing. That's why I don't trust like Bitcoin and that. I'm sorry. WikiLeaks, Anonymous, I don't think any of it's grassroots. Supermarket keeping track of what customers buy to increase healthy eating. So they're spying on the shopping habits of customers who want to slim and advise them how to eat more healthily. Experts have built an online tool dubbed the Healthy Little Difference Tracker that will measure how customers' habits change the following health drive. Could government law enforcement turn your store loyalty card data against you? One example is New York City's mayor banning sugary drinks above certain sizes. Eventually it could lead into... One person says, I can absolutely see them using this information to target communities with whom they disagree with their purchasing choices. Spy on her neighbor, says former MI5. So they said invoked a wartime spirit. She said the public had a duty to act as the eyes and ears of security services in combating terrorists. Lords call to revive internet monitoring bill after Woolwich killing. They want Snoopers Charter back on the agenda. U.S. and China to hold talks on controlling the internet, how to set standards of behavior for cybersecurity. Google is ordered to give private customer data to the FBI. A U.S. judge has ordered Google to comply with the FBI's demands. U.S. Supreme Court says police can take DNA upon arrest and charged but not convicted of a serious crime. They say it's a major victory for law enforcement officers. Schools scan students' irises without permission. It was part of a student safety pilot program. So, of course, they say it simply takes a picture of the iris. So they defended Mission Impossible style contact lenses that can take pictures and scan data are a step closer to reality as scientists develop LED soft lenses. And Google Glass bans facial recognition over privacy concerns. Tattoos and pills might someday replace passwords. Again, that internet monitoring system stalks social media users who question safety of vaccines and death by flu shot. 7-year-old receives a flu shot and dies. Thank you.